The Indianapolis Colts are off this week for their bye week, but there's still a lot of questions that Colts fans have. Who's going to be the next head coach? Who's going to be the next quarterback? Well, let's talk about it. Welcome to another episode of the Horseshoe Huddle podcast brought to you by Fan Nation on SI.com. My name is Andrew Moore, and I'm joined here by my co-host and fellow writer at Horseshoe Huddle, Drake Wally. Drake, how you doing, man? How have you been spending the bye week? Have you gotten away from Colts football? Is it still front and center on your mind? How's it going, man?
It's to kind of talk about what you spoke about not long ago is, sometimes it's nice to get away, I've kind of been backing off a little bit, but here the past couple of days been diving right back into it, and a whole lot of draft talk now, a whole lot of who's going to, kind of like you said, who's going to be the head coach. So perfect time to answer some questions, man.
Right, exactly. So tonight, well, we don't have a game to preview this weekend since the Colts are on the bye. We're just going to do a question and answer, simple Q&A, talking about all the Colts questions leading up to whether it's the next couple weeks, whether it's the next couple months. We're going to talk about it all. So we did get some questions from Twitter and from Facebook today. We will run through those first. And then after that, I'll go through the chat here and we will answer any of those questions that are left over. So should be a fun episode tonight. Get your questions out there, get engaged with us.
It's laid back, let's just have fun.
Exactly. Let's talk some Colts football. But before we do that, guys, I say it every episode because it's just that important. Please go give us a follow if you like us on all of the things. Go like Horseshoe Huddle on Facebook. Follow Horseshoe Huddle on Twitter at Colts on FN. Subscribe to Horseshoe Huddle on YouTube. Go ahead and follow Drake at DWalster Drake on Twitter. I'm at Andrew Moore NFL on Twitter. So guys, let's get right into it. And as a homage to a Colts podcast, the first question is going to come from my old co-host, Drake and I's friend, Brandon Moses. So Brandon asks, who would you like to see as the head coach next year? Jeff Saturday, Jim Harbaugh, Eric Bieniemy, or someone else? So Drake, I'm gonna open up this question and see if you have any head coaching candidates that you've got on your mind, whether it's a coordinator somewhere, someone on the Colts staff here, someone that's coached in college. Who would you like to see as the head guy for the Colts in 2023?
So for me, it's actually a tie between two. I got praised on Twitter for one and then got criticized for another. But the first one I would say is Kellen Moore, from offensive coordinator of the Dallas Cowboys, strictly because he understands the run game. And holy cow, that is entirely what sets up Dak Prescott to be so successful. So love that with Jonathan Taylor and whoever else. Maybe he could get Zach Moss going. You never know. But on the other end of it, we got a defensive coordinator in San Francisco named DeMeco Ryans, who is former Houston Texans. I mean, he was a grim reaper out there with Brian Cushing back in the day. That was a difficult defense to move the ball on, and he has done wonders for San Francisco's defense. So if he's looking for a head coaching position, I think the Colts would be a perfect spot for him, especially with the young defense that they've got.
Oh yeah. And I am at Stats Matt chimes right in, says, don't say Kellen, Drake. Come on.
I knew it.
Stats Matt against
so
that one.
Flack.
But hey, it's an interesting pick. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to talk about, you talked about DeMeco Ryans. I am all in on DeMeco Ryans. I love his tenacity. I love what he has done with that San Francisco defense. They're one of the best, if not the best defense in the entire National Football League. And players love him. So if we're going defensive side of the ball, DeMeco Ryans would be my number one. Yeah. Leslie Frazier also, a guy who used to be with the Colts, has ties to the Tony Dungy staff, and he's been the Buffalo Bills defensive coordinator for the past few years, has some head coaching experience with the Vikings. He would be another one on the defensive side. As far as the offensive side of the ball, there's quite a few. I think I would go with Ken Dorsey offensive coordinator for the Buffalo Bills, a guy that has been with Josh Allen for a long time, was with Cam Newton back in Carolina, helped develop him. So he's got a history of developing young quarterbacks, something the Colts are going to need. You look at Mike Kafka, the offensive coordinator for the New York Giants, as Stats Matt says here. Kafka would be good for a young QB.
Yeah.
If you're looking for an offensive guy, really to mold that young quarterback that the Colts are presumably going to draft, absolutely, you want one of those guys on the offensive ball. Then there's some other guys. Jim Harbaugh, a huge name that Jim Irsay really likes. He's a former Colt. He just has success wherever he went. So would Jim Irsay open up the checkbook to try to bring Jim Harbaugh from Michigan back to an NFL sideline? Very well could be. I think he is going to be a name you hear a lot, especially connected with the Colts throughout this cycle.
Well, so
go ahead.
Sorry. I was going to say that everyone's talking about, Harbaugh, and everybody would love to see, Jim Harbaugh back on an NFL sideline, because he's one of the few guys I've seen outside of Pete Carroll who it was a seamless transition for him from college football to NFL. It didn't even take a year. I mean, he is an incredible football mind. If it happened and there was that pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, that'd be pretty great for the Indianapolis Colts.
Right. Tom Brady, our friend Tom Brady, he would ask this question earlier: who would you like to see as the next head coach? If out of those guys that we had talked about, in my opinion, I think my number one is Ken Dorsey. My number two is Jim Harbaugh, though. I think Jim Harbaugh could be a guy that this Colts team really resonates with. So I would probably go Ken Dorsey 1, Jim Harbaugh maybe 1A, and then DeMeco Ryans right there at number 2, because I'm a huge DeMeco Ryans fan. But let's get into another question that a lot of people are talking about. This one courtesy of the third host of this show. Stats Matt put this one earlier today. What is your top 5 priority list for the roster heading into the offseason? So I can start with this one since I gave it to you last time, Drake. Obviously, quarterback has to be number 1. Matt Ryan is not going to be here next year. Whether he retires, whether the Colts trade him, doesn't matter. The Colts will have a new starting quarterback. Quarterback has to be found this year. Then I think you go offensive line number 2. Obviously, you need to find more competition or starters for that offensive line at various positions. I would then go edge rusher, probably number 3, because who knows if Yannick Ngakoue is back or not. We know Kwity Paye is ascending, but do the Colts pay that much for Yannick Ngakoue? We'll have to see. Cornerback, Stephon Gilmore is not getting any younger. Kenny Moore has taken a little bit of a drop off, so we'll see there. All of those elite positions, and then I think you still have to look at wide receiver and maybe a blocking tight end. Do the Colts re-sign Paris Campbell? Do they look to upgrade at wide receiver? Most of your positions are going to look on the offensive side of the ball, besides those core defensive positions like pass rusher and cornerback.
Yeah, and I don't even need to provide my top 5, because that's literally it. And I think one of the most important things that's been overlooked is the corner position outside of Gilmore. I mean, it's outside of Gilmore and Rogers, Rogers Sr., it's been kind of, up and down for Kenny Moore. It's been definitely up and down for Faison. I mean, it's been a very hot and cold performance sometimes from the secondary, and I'm sure it'd be nice for the Colts to be able to address that a little more. And then, just like you said, that offensive line, it started out a little rocky at left tackle and right guard. You had huge holes, and everyone's like, well, why do these 3 guys that are so good before Kelly, Nelson, and Smith, why are they struggling? Well, imagine if you're used to blocking one guy as Nelson, and all of a sudden here comes the left side collapsing on top of you too. Right. Your efficiency is going to it's going to tank. So that's also something that they would really appreciate, getting a little continuity back
yeah, to. Absolutely. Stats Matt says one I overlooked: re-signing Chase McLaughlin, a kicker that's came in, and he's done a pretty damn good job.
Yes, Phil, he has.
He's like you've mentioned multiple times on the show, he has over a third of the Colts points this year, which is out. I mean, outstanding for him, maybe not for
Good
the
for a
Colts.
contract. That's
Yeah,
what's
good for a
for.
contract. I think he has earned a second contract. I do think the Colts should bring in some competition, but I do think you re-sign him and you bring in competition heading into camp, and may the best man win. Kurt, thanks for joining us. This kind of goes back to our conversation about the coach. He says, I do not feel that Harbaugh would leave Michigan, though it would be nice. I think we will look at offensive coordinators from San Francisco or for the Rams. That could be interesting. Time for a rebuild in a rough 3 to 4 years. I don't think it needs to take 3 to 4 years. I think this team is closer than you might think, but we will see. So let's get to our next question here. This one comes from Levi. And this one comes of talking about some of the quarterback prospects. And this, my beautiful mother, Laura Moore, also chiming in about potential quarterbacks. Good to see you watching the show. But Levi says, outside of the top 2 QB prospects in this coming draft, Bryce Young and CJ Stroud, who would you be happy with the Colts drafting? Who would you be unhappy or cautious with this drafting, and why? So this is a good question. And I think this is going to be a question that is heavily debated among Colts fans for months, until April 28th, 29th, whenever the first round of the draft is. This is going to be a debate. We're not talking about Bryce Young and CJ Stroud. Let's assume they're off the table. Who is a guy that you would be very happy the Colts draft? And who's a guy that you, if you see the Colts draft, you pause and say, man, I don't know if that was the right pick. Drake, have you really looked into the prospects coming up? And if so, who would be those picks for you and why?
I believe it's, please forgive me if I'm wrong, Caleb Williams from the
Caleb Williams from USC. He is not eligible this year. He'll be eligible in 2020, the 2024 draft.
Okay, so essentially, so he's definitely been somebody that's been on a lot of people's radars, but it would be kind of nice to get Will Levis.
Mm-hmm.
I know that's been a name that a lot of people get a little bit nervous about hearing, but I just absolutely love the grit. I think that's good for the Colts. I think it is what Baker Mayfield would have liked to look like at this point in his career, and I think that this guy's a lot more mature for his age, and I think that'd be a really good pick for the Colts. That'd be my pick.
Will Levis is a guy I'm very high on. He's probably, if we're not talking about Bryce Young or CJ Stroud, Levis is my guy. And again, once we get after the season, I am going to do deep dives on all these guys' film for Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, Will Levis on down, and then really make my final pick. But from what I've seen, just of the film I've seen so far, Will Levis is my guy. I mean, he's got prototypical size, 6'3", 6'4", 240 pounds, monster arm, mobile, tough, hell of a leader. Can't say that you hear everybody talk about how he is tremendous work ethic, the things he does off the field. The kid gets it. The kid wants to be great. And Stats Matt says, well, Levis is his number one as well. Mel Kiper has Levis as QB1, and Draft Network has him going number one overall. The things that I've heard about Will Levis as far as what the NFL scouts and NFL franchises think, NFL teams are very, very high on Will Levis. There's a chance that Will Levis doesn't even make it to the Colts where they're picking. If they pick somewhere between 7 and 9, the Colts may need to trade up a little bit. Or if the Colts make it inside that top pick and there's one of CJ Stroud or Bryce Young is still on the board, Will Levis still may be taken ahead of them. So he's going to be a very polarizing prospect throughout this whole draft process. But Stats Matt mentioned the other guy that I don't know if I would be unhappy about it, but I would be cautious about taking Anthony Richardson. And again, I have not really done a deep dive into his film. Quarterback out of Florida, doesn't have much starting experience, but the traits are absolutely elite. He's 6'5", 250 pounds, incredibly mobile, has a great arm. He's just very raw. He looks like he's maybe another in the mold of Cam Newton. He has a very low completion percentage, which I mean, the offense you're playing in, that can have a lot of factors in that. So I'm not going to put that totally on him. But there's some throws where you're like, wow, this kid is absolutely incredible. But there's some other throws that it's like, man, that really scares me. So he's more of a guy that right now I would say is more of a project. He's going to need a little bit of time to be developed. Levis, maybe not so much. Richardson's also younger, 21 versus Levis, who's 24. So there's a lot of different things that could go into this. So I would say my guy for now is Levis. A little bit unsure on Richardson. Stats Matt says Cam Newton with a better arm. That's a good comparison. Wyatt Law. Richardson has incredible traits which Ballard loves, but will Ballard be doing the draft next April? It's a great question, Wyatt Law, and we're going to talk about that here tonight. So let's move it along to Camden. He said, do you think Chris Ballard and Matt Ryan get replaced? I already gave my opinion on Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan, I think, is gone. Yeah. I don't think Matt Ryan will be back in a Colts uniform. Like I said, retirement, trade, release. Matt Ryan could very well have played his last game as a Colt on Sunday night against the Cowboys. Do I think Chris Ballard will be replaced? At this point, I think it's 50-50 because while Jim Irsay has said that Ballard is safe, he hasn't given thought to replacing Ballard. Chris Ballard's fingerprints and how this team is performing, or I should say how this team's performing and this team in its state has Chris Ballard's fingerprints all over it. This is his team. He built it from the ground up. He focused on the trenches, and the trenches have been awful, especially on the offensive side of the ball. I wouldn't say on the defensive side when you got guys like Big Grove and Buckner just dominating on that side. Quiddy Pace looked really good. But for those that were blaming Frank Reich, and obviously that has shown that it's not just Frank Reich that's the problem. You got to be putting the heat on Chris Ballard as well. So I'd put it at 50-50. Chris Ballard is the man in charge come this spring.
Yeah, to kind of just, back what Andrew said, I don't think there is even a 1% chance Matt Ryan is the quarterback next year. And as you said, there's even, argument that he's not even going to be the quarterback against the Vikings. But as far as Ballard, it's really difficult to say because he's got such a mind for football. He understands how to save money very well, maybe not how to spend it. But he also had to, account for he had to account for Shaquille Leonard. He had to account for Quentin Nelson. He had to account for Braden Smith and a lot of contracts too. So there's good, there's bad. It's really ultimately going to be up to whoever's out there on the market and, what he has as competition because his neck's on the line right now.
Right. Absolutely. So I think, like I said, we both think it's up in the air. We'll have to see what Jim Irsay decides once the season's over. The next question from Taryn, and I'll let you go first on this one, Drake. Has Jeff Saturday done enough so far to be considered to be hired as the Colts head coach full time?
No, I don't think he's done enough. I mean, he's one and let's see, he's 1-3, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. He'd be 1-3.
1-2.
Well, okay, 1-2. Okay, so yeah, he lost to the Steelers, lost to the Cowboys. Okay, so
I forgot about the Steelers. 1-3. Yes,
no,
so he is 1-3.
Yeah, you're right. So long story short, you're 1-3, and you came in here. You got hired for a complete culture change. Now, the big win, obviously, coming from the Raiders, but as I've said multiple times, that cannot be your glorious moment. And for someone to be like, that's the future head coach. So I think he's got to close out these last 4 games pretty dang strong to be able to consider, being the guy. And you can't just make it Houston either. You got to give at least a game to the Chargers and the Giants.
Right. And I don't think he has done enough. I think once this is done and this is over with, I don't think he will be a serious contender to be the head coach next year. Yeah. Jeff Saturday, a hell of a guy, but he's just shown how the not having experience has killed him. I mean, not using your timeouts, maybe not challenging in certain spots. There's some quotes where he said, like, this week he was asked about Matt Ryan's shoulder injury, and Jeff Saturday said, well, I don't really ask players about injuries. And as a head coach, you kind of need to do that to protect players from themselves at some point. When you ask the players, they always say he's a good motivator, keeps guys accountable, but they really don't talk about any of the intricacies that he brings to the coaching position. So, I mean, again, Jeff Saturday, hell of a guy, great person. You couldn't meet a nicer guy in the organization. I just don't think he's going to be the head coach.
Yeah, I 100% agree.
Next question, another one for Terrence. Since the season is practically over, do you have any favorite players coming up in the draft you would like to see join the Horseshoe? Again, we talked about the quarterbacks and Will Levis. I think we were both on board there. Another guy that I could see, I like Josh Downs, the wide receiver out of North Carolina. He's a smaller guy, but the way he works in the slot, I think he could be good. Really, I haven't dove too much into this draft class quite yet. I usually start doing that as soon as the season ends, and then I kind of dive into the film. There's some guys here and there, but I think when you look at who the Colts are going to target at the very top of the draft, it's going to be quarterback, it's going to be offensive line, it's going to be pass rusher.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And actually, for me personally, I would love to see them. I think it's Calais Ringo from Georgia. I mean, he's essentially 6'2", 225 pounds, and he's basically a representation of, I don't know how many people remember Cam Chancellor, but he was a terror at safety. But this is a cornerback, and I really think that the Colts they need to admit it. They need depth at cornerback, and maybe it's paid off with Ngakoue, but Yassine is definitely missed in that position.
Right. And I'd love to see Isaiah Rodgers take a full-time starting spot. So
also
we'd like to see that. Stats Matt saying Cody Mooch from, I think that's from North Dakota State, if I'm remembering right. Stats Matt says he would be a day 2 offensive lineman. We've got Devin Witherspoon, a cornerback from Illinois, that he'd love to see in Indy. So we'll keep that in mind as well. But yeah, once we get close to the draft, definitely going to be diving in head first into all that. Now we got a question from Todd here. Todd says, where do the Colts go from here? Do they start Ryan or do they go with Foles? I'd play Foles and see what he can do. Drake, what say you? What did the Colts do at quarterback for the rest of the season?
It depends completely on what you're looking for. Are you looking to try to close out with some wins? You need to play Nick Foles. You need to put Nick Foles in there with that offense. If you're looking to see the floor and the ceiling of what you have to offer, you need to put Sam Ehlinger in. I personally would much, because we've seen Nick Foles. I mean, he won a Super Bowl, but everybody needs to understand that pretty much anytime he's gotten a contract to start, he's either gotten hurt or he's been very mediocre. So anyway, moving on, I would put in Ehlinger. I would definitely start Ehlinger.
Yeah, I would agree there. I've seen people say that it's Nick Foles' turn. He's the only quarterback that hasn't gotten a chance. But the thing is, the rest of this year is not about this year. There's nothing to play for this year. Everything that the Colts should be doing should be geared toward 2023 and beyond. Nick Foles is not going to be your quarterback in 2023. He might be a backup, but he's certainly not going to be your starter in 2023. You got to play Sam Ehlinger at this point. You played it for 2 games. Give him 4 more starts. What could it hurt? I mean, he couldn't possibly get any worse from the 54-19 embarrassment in Dallas. So give Sam Ehlinger 4 more starts. Then you have 6 games to evaluate him on and see what you got. Do you have a backup quarterback? Do you have someone that you can keep? Then you can kind of go from there. So let's kind of dive into some of the questions here that we were getting in the chat. So let's see. Tom Brady. I think we already went over this. Who would you like to see as the next head coach? Kurt was talking about quarterback round 1 with that kid from Tennessee of Hendon Hooker. Hendon Hooker coming off an ACL tear. I would say that he is probably behind Levis and Richardson. You probably take a day 2 pick on him possibly, but I don't think the Colts do that. The Colts are looking at probably getting one of the top guys. Their sole focus should be quarterback first round. And if it isn't, then I think that whoever's in charge should not be in charge, because you got to figure out the quarterback position. You just do. It's gone on for way too long. let's keep moving it along here. Let's see.
Real quick, I was going to say regarding Hooker, that would have been my player to watch out for, like
Hmm.
because of the ACL tear solely. Because it seems like people are so high on him, they forget that
Right,
he's got that ACL tear.
right. Tom Brady. Are you flirting with us, my guy? He said, "What would you think if I was your starting quarterback next year?" Drake, what if Tom
Oh
Brady,
man,
age 45, 46 season, suiting up in the blue and white for the Colts?
I obviously, he's in his mid 40s, but a solid run game, a good defense, and at least some kind of explosion from a receiver or maybe even a tight end. You just need a little bit of everything. And I still feel like even with the age, he could probably still get you at least to the conference championship and maybe even win one.
Tom Brady, I think if you're leaving the offense in Tampa Bay when you got Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and the like for this offense and this offensive line, buddy, I think you've gone off the deep end at that point. But hey, we'll have to see.
Nice.
Let's see. Stats Matt commenting from earlier. Ballard should take blame. And he says, I don't see any of the top candidates, coaching candidates, who have choices wanting to tie their job to Ballard. That's a
Hmm.
very good point. I think I'm Raul. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing your name right. If not, please correct me. Again, thank you for joining the show. He says, hey, gents, who do you think would be the ideal head coach rookie quarterback combinations? For me, Ken Dorsey with Anthony Richardson just makes too much sense. Dorsey coaching Newton and Allen, my two comps for Anthony Richardson. And we kind of talked about that. We kind of talked about how Ken Dorsey was with those two, and he has experience developing a quarterback that might be coming in a little raw, but has very elite traits. Here's my thing. I like Ken Dorsey, but pair him with Will Levis because I think Will Levis, just his ceiling and that it factor that he has, to me, I think it's just a little bit higher than what Anthony Richardson has. And I don't think you have to wait as long on him as you might Anthony Richardson, just not as big of a wild card.
Mine would still be Will Levis, but it would be with D'Amico Ryans because the best medicine to assist a rookie quarterback with success is a solid defense and a good ground game. And I think that if you had a coach that understood that, he'd succeed.
Yeah, I mean that could be. It's really going to be, and that's the thing too. When we figure out that's going to be play a huge role is which quarterback do you want based on which staff is in place,
Yep.
because so many times with these young quarterbacks, the organization they go to and the situation that they are drafted into means so much as far as their chances of success in the NFL. Wyatt Law says that Saturday indicated this bye week would be spent doing top to bottom evaluation. How closely are he and Chris Ballard collaborating on this process? I think they're collaborating very, very closely.
Oh
I
yeah.
mean, you hear about Frank Reich and Chris Ballard, how close they were. Jeff Saturday is stepping in, and he's doing the same thing. While I don't think Chris Ballard particularly liked bringing in Jeff Saturday, Chris Ballard is still like he's still working for his job. Like his job is still on the line. So of course he wants to do the best that he can, and working with Saturday is the best thing in Chris Ballard's interest, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think that really Saturday does at this point want to try to get the job. I'm sure
Mm-hmm.
that would mean a lot to him to get the job. So the best chance of both of them keeping their jobs. There's a lot of moving parts. You've got Ballard, on the line. You've got Saturday on the line. Then you've got the QB is changing, and then you've got the coach could be changing. It's just all that moving at once. It's just a very difficult process. But I would hope to say that they're working closely during it.
Right, absolutely. Kadam has another question. Which quarterback out of the draft has a chance to perform at a level with our learning offensive line? It's a challenge, and that's key, really. And it's kind of where I think the NFL in general is heading to. You need a quarterback that's not a statue in the pocket, a
Yep.
quarterback that can make plays off platform, make plays outside the pocket. And that's why when you're thinking about guys like Will Levis and Anthony Richardson, those guys have that mobility. Hendon Hooker, I mean, we talked about him for a little bit. he can move sometimes, but he's just not the athlete, I would say, of a Will Levis or an Anthony Richardson. CJ Stroud, probably the best pure passer in this
Mhm.
class as far as accuracy, touch, ball placement, but he's more of a pure pocket passer and a guy that when the pocket gets muddy and things start to go off platform, he does not perform nearly as well as what he does when he's got that clean pocket and can throw to those dominant wide receivers there at Ohio State. So I think that's what you're looking for in a quarterback nowadays, is someone that can, when the pocket breaks down because of all these different edge rushers coming in, he's still able to make plays down the field. I think that's key.
Well, and it's also the defense has adjusted to that. They have lighter defensive tackles. They have lighter, more mobile defensive ends. Look at Aaron Donald. He is the perfect combination of speed and strength. But kind of like you said, it's really a toss up because you got to be able to pair it correctly with the coach. And so that's going to be a really big equation that's going to have to be solved by the Colts during the offseason. It's really math, and you're not used to it. Usually, you just need a coach or you just need a quarterback. In this case, you need both, and that's double the difficulty.
Right. It's Stats Matt kind of answering the question here. He says it has to be Levis because his offensive line stunk in college. Very true. That the games that I have watched of Kentucky, that offensive line was bad, real bad. And Will Levis basically tried to will that team in spite of that. So he's got some experience there, which definitely for the Colts, especially, bodes in his favor. So we're going to look at a couple more comments here. Stats Matt also says play all the young guys you think will be around next season and Sam at QB. I think
Oh, yeah.
we agree on that. And Ryan cannot start. He gets hurt. We are on the hook for his salary. Kind of wrote about that in my piece this week, that if Matt Ryan cannot pass a physical on the third day of the league year, that $12 million that's guaranteed for injury goes to him, and the Colts are on the hook for that much, and it counts against the cap. Rest JT and let Jackson and Moss run to avoid injury. We'll see. I think with Jonathan Taylor still wanting to go out there and perform, I don't think that's as likely as sitting Ryan to look at Sam Ellinger, because when you are evaluating Sam Ellinger, you want all of the other pieces around him so you get a fair evaluation. So I think Jonathan Taylor, I don't think there's really any talk about Jonathan Taylor resting. And I think we'll do one more question here. We're only about a half hour. So Taryn asks for the last question of the night: what, if anything, can be done to make this offense work? What is it going to take to make competent offense show up once again? I'll have you go, Drake. What do you think is going to take for this offense to be competent?
Oh man, that is so hard to answer. It's going to depend on. I'll answer this way. It's going to depend on who is the signal caller. If it's Foles, it's going to be, you got to protect him long enough to get rid of the ball quickly. You're going to have to run the ball enough for him to play action off of it. He's experienced enough. He's going to have to be able to get the short passes off. So you're going to need your tight ends to be better. You're going to need your slot guys to be better. You're going to need your blocking to at least hold up for a little bit, because they're not good enough to hold up long. But if you start Ellinger, you have a little more freedom. You can do bootlegs and stuff like that. We've seen success. We've seen Ellinger under pressure do pretty well. So it's, at the end of the day, though, it's taking care of the ball. It's taking care of the ball. You can't keep on handing it to professionals, whether they're number 32 or number 1. It's a league of professionals, and they'll take advantage of it.
Right. You hit it right on the head there. It's the turnovers. The turnovers is really what cost this offense. Without the turnovers, they would probably be closer to a below average unit. With the turnovers, they're the worst offense in the league, bar none. And it really, if that's really the only chance they have of maybe turning things around is the turnovers. But we're 13 games in, and they're continuing to turn the ball over at a high rate every game. At this point, that's just what this is. We'll sneak in one more here for Wyatt Law, who's always a loyal listener. Will Reggie Wayne be one and done as a Colts coach? I hope not. Wyatt, I hope not either. But for everything that this Colts team has gone through this year, and Reggie Wayne himself saying if he knew this is how the season was going to go, he probably wouldn't have taken that job. I don't think Reggie Wayne will probably be back next year unless he receives considerable raise and the head coach is an offensive guy who really, really, really wants to keep Reggie Wayne. Otherwise, I think Reggie Wayne might go back to retirement life on the beach down there in South Florida.
Yeah, they wanted to get the dream team back together, with Saturday and Wayne, but you've actually seen them literally argue on the sidelines. I think it was the Philadelphia game. So I think that if I made a bold prediction, I think that you're going to see a shakeup enough where you're not going to see that anymore, unfortunately.
Right. Right. So that's it for this evening. Thank you guys so much. You guys brought it with the questions on Twitter, Facebook, and especially in the chat. You guys were rocking it. We really appreciate it. Tonight's episode was a blast. It really was.
It was awesome.
Again, if you weren't here at the beginning, please go follow us on all the things and subscribe on YouTube. It really, really does make a difference. I said this in the last episode, but November was one of the best months, not only for the podcast, but for the Horseshoe Huddle site in general. That's because of you guys reading our work and giving us your feedback. So again, like on Facebook, Horseshoe Huddle. Follow on Twitter at Colts on FN. Subscribe on YouTube. Hit the bell so you get notifications to know when Drake and I go live, so you guys can get the chat popping like it was tonight. Makes those episodes just so much more fun for us, and it gets you guys talking more Colts football, which we all love. You can follow Drake at D. Drake on Twitter. You can follow me at Andrew Moore NFL. The Colts are on a bye week, so hey, again, get away from it for a little bit. Watch and enjoy football. You don't have to stress out whether the Colts are going to be winning or losing or what's going to happen. Just enjoy football for what it is. But we will be back next week on Wednesday night. So make sure you put that in your schedules on Wednesday. Kurt asking, when will Horseshoe Huddle merch drop? Hey, I'm going to have to ask some of the higher ups about that. See if we can get some merch out there. We'd love. We'll talk to Jake about that. Drake.
Yeah,
we'll see
that's right.
if Jake can pull some strings.
Let's bring it up immediately.
But maybe it'll be a shirt of Zach talking to a kicker or something. That'd be pretty hilarious.
That'd be perfect.
But yeah, we will be back on Wednesday night next week. We'll just do one episode next week. We will get you all ready for the Colts versus the Vikings. Bold predictions, keys to victory. I'll be heading off to my honeymoon. So after that, it'll be Drake, and we'll have a special host with you here. But hey, until next time, thank you so much for watching, and everyone enjoy the bye week.